In contrast to where I think Godslaying magic is like steeped in mystery of like how exactly this possibly would have spawned in the when you think about it as well, it's like could it predate dragon slaying magic? Is it is it something that came shortly after? What was the cause of it? Like what happened that the gods turned against or the humans turned against gods? Why exactly would they come up with this magic? That there's a lot more so in say like we have like actual direct information with dragon slaying magic, but where we don't have any with the third slayer magic, but the most understandable is devil slaying magic. I know it comes out as demon slaying as well. I think that the easiest is the fact that in the Japanese they even say it as devil slayer in in English while they're speaking Japanese, and I'm like, well, that's as far as I know, that's probably like on the script written as Devil Slayer in English, right on amongst all the different kanji and stuff. But as it were, it makes sense to me. I think more so than God slaying magic because with God slaying, generally the humans are going to worship them in a lot of cases. So it's like it's one of those ones where there needs to be a lore reason as getting to it. And on top of that, we know that especially now because we know from Viernes. Let me pull this over here. When Gray attacked him with his Devil Slayer magic, he says, ice and dark magic that it didn't exist 400 years ago. So we know, like in just hard confirmation, that Devil Slayer magic was not in the same category, with Dragon Slayer magic or potentially God Slayer magic in these more ancient ones. Because I think it makes sense that Devil Slayer magic would be a much more modern day human problem. Not something with dragons way back, hundreds of years ago when they were way more prevalent, but more so after all of Xerath's demons and some of the natural born demons, which I'll talk about at a different point, just within the verse of Fairy Tail and what exactly they, would lead to a Devil Slayer being a needed thing. Because obviously, I think if you were able to invent a Slayer magic, you would either know of or would find out about the side effects of it, of what it does. Let me see if I have this panel pulled up. Yeah, I have this from what we know for a fact from Invul, is that using Devil Slayer magic comes at a price, and it similar to how dragon slaying magic you eventually turn into a dragon. The devil slayer magic, the person loses their minds in the process and become a demon. This is also one of the reasons that I think it would make sense that whereas dragons, you have a dragon existing in the verse naturally in most cases. So just from their structure of like how they work in their species and their day to day and how they go about everything in a much more power influenced way of hierarchy, it would make sense of why the higher end dragons, of each element would hold these titles that are earned again through strength of just the natural way that they would go about as a species. Whereas with demons and devils, we know that they're not all in the same way. We know from Galuna Island that there's a bunch of demons that are, as far as we know, they can't really fight at all. They're just regular human levels of strength, maybe a little bit more enhanced because they can fly and whatnot, and have just a little bit more enhanced physiology than what you would have with a regular human. Like their physical stats might just be +1 instead of the whatever humans are generally at. So with this, you look at where the problem would be, and I think that with the most logical reason being the Aetherius, not just from Xerath, but any Xerath just followers, anyone within his style of thinking with black magic, as we have now with Ferris, that it makes sense of why a Devil Slayer would come about. But the question would be with this, I think that it would make sense for one if you had singular demons and devils within the verse be at the top of their food chain of like a certain attribute. Like if Gray is like if there isn't like if each is a specific path. Like all of the ice demons are relatively similar, and it'd be like if you don't have as many of the variety types of Dragon Slayer. If it's like you just have fire, you just have water, earth, wind. You don't have stuff like iron, stuff like sky or white. It just kind of like would make it way more basic, but in the process of it, it's more so everybody within this type maybe is in a kind of power struggle in like a one, and it's almost like the idea of being like the Highlander. You know, you're all trying to fight for one position. There can only be one of each kind, and maybe that's why one you only have one at the time with Gray getting it from Silver, and maybe that's how it has to work because you can't have multiple. And it'd be like, well, maybe it ties to one. It ties to one demon specifically, and eventually, because it'd be like maybe with the way that devil slaying magic works, you would want to find the demon or devil of that specific attribute, exercise it, and then you gain that power, and then that would determine maybe if you become that demon again or you gain its full strength. And you know, it's like their equivalent to Dragon Force, but you know, Gray could get some really cool new form. I don't know, like I'm trying to think of like the weird lore and stuff you could do with it to where it because I don't think it's just, oh yeah, some guy was like, you know what would be really cool? What if I made devil slayers? It's like dragon slaying. You ever heard of those? But we just have devil powers and stuff. There's no way that it was just some guy that did it. That's one of the things about other slayer types I've always thought was very strange not for us to know about, was the story that led up to them. Because it's not, you know, it's not the same thing as like, oh yeah, I'm using a sword and I'm now just imbuing the power of what I kill, or you know, aspects of their abilities into my sword. No, it's way more specific and complex when you think of it, because you're altering the DNA of the person that you know that you're using it on, assumingly so yourself. And in the process of that, you have a magic that is ultimately going to turn you into another being entirely with its own. You're just straight out genetically shifting. You're not using transformation magic to just turn into it temporarily. You are genetically altering yourself permanently. So with this as well, it's always been very odd to me that we were introduced with a Devil Slayer and then we never got another Devil Slayer. Because with Gray, it makes sense that, you know, if we're not going to get another Ice Devil Slayer, and maybe we'll get that sometime within you know, later in 100 Years Quest, in the later portions of this arc, or maybe Mishima's like, I really want to use I've got an idea for a God Slayer, but it's gonna be whenever we get to Fairy Tail Next Generations in like 2028. But as it were, it just makes me wonder exactly what like, why is he only had one Devil Slayer? Is like the idea is just, well, I had it with Gray and I don't need to have it with another character, or you know, just you don't really need anything for lore. I don't think so, because we could easily just have Silver be explained that Silver invented it. Silver created Devil Slayer magic because he heard of Dragon Slayers. Like, you could get it as simplified as that, but I've always thought it doesn't really make sense for us not to have an explanation as to why, not as to why people got to this point, because I think it makes sense. You could understand, you know, demons wreaking havoc with people, but more so of what character managed to do it. How did they get to the point where they could experiment and achieve this type of magic, and where are they? Because if it's not Silver, it has to be somebody relatively significant. It can't, because like a character who invents a high level magic like this can't just be nobody. Maybe that's what we'll find out. We'll find out something like, oh yeah, the Devil Slayers, there's originally was like 3 of them, and they created the magic, and Gray has to go hunt them at some point, for, you know, whatever his final thing, you know, adventure before the Ignia clash, and maybe he'll fight Full Dragon Lekka. And then we'll get like, it'll be like 4 years from now, the final clash finally, and everybody had their own personal spin-off arc, flashback, extra story that led to their ultimate form, as they go into the final battle. I don't know, as it were. I'm hoping that once we get potentially any form of further progression of Devil Slayers, or if we find out any more information on them, anything from, say, again, if we ever get it in another character that's introduced from 100 Years Quest, maybe we could get some form of video game exclusive character that Mishima's like, this character is technically canon, they just exist out in the verse, something like that. Who knows? But I've always thought the same way that, again, like God Slayers, Devil Slayers just need just some form of way to be added in the story that doesn't have to just be like, yeah, we're randomly gonna have a Devil Slayer arc out of nowhere. I think you like I think a missed opportunity personally for me was you should have had some form of Strauss sibling spinoff where it was, Devil Slayers, like whoever, you have some Bloodborne style where it's like the family that invented Devil Slayers are coming after Mira Jane, because Mira Jane to them is like this modern, like they hear about this girl who in a church became a demon and she's been out causing havoc and doing XYZ, and you thought that she died on an island. Then she came back, and you're like, oh man, this crazy thing that has been like in the back corners and conversations of our family. We're finally gonna go after him, and you find out from those characters the origins of devil slaying. But no, I don't really know. It's odd to me that we haven't had anything except like the wording from, like, we got from Viernes the fact that he confirms that devil slaying is not an ancient magic, it's not a lost magic, whereas with that as well, we know that this means that there should be potentially a character that has the information on it, but we just don't have, we have no reason to bring it up. I'm hoping so bad that one of the things with the Erasion sex and the Erasion Seis is going to lead into information on what's going on with Ferris. But for right now, I'm just putting that in the back burner because who knows what's going to happen with that. So another thing that, like I said, that we could have that would give us information on, lore reasons, but also the results of devil slaying, is because we know that it can corrupt you. It can corrupt your heart and your mind and turn you into a mindless demon. So with that, could Gray end up having, in some form of scenario, or maybe that's Ferris will reveal it. Like, say, like Ferris, I think that's the best way. Ferris goes and collects, like, Pokemon. She finds other Devil Slayers that got to that point, but they lost control. Because what if, like, the original areas of Devil Slaying had to do with, like, you had part of a demon or a devil, you consumed it, and that turned you into a Devil Slayer, but that process made it faster, so it was worse for you if those people lost their minds way earlier. And it wasn't until later when they looked, further research, they found out that Devil Slayers, or that Dragon Slayers, how they worked, and said, oh, okay, well, we'll actually do it like this, and it is a much safer process. And you could maybe have that with that, Georg maybe invented 5th generation dragon slaying magic by reading about the invention of the original Devil Slayers, like, loop these into each other so they add extra layers of lore on top of it. But right now, I really think that it's one of the better. I personally think that Devil Slayer magic is better than God Slayer magic in Existence of the Verse, just because we've seen so much of it, and it doesn't feel to me the same way that Mishima, like, it. Gunslaying Magic always felt to me like he just wanted to make a more overpowered version. Like, it's just kind of like, you have a character and then you have a character around his level, but he's roided out. So he just has a more juiced up direct ability, but he himself isn't as capable of a character. But with that, Devil Sling has only been on Gray. So we have only really seen, from the standpoint of Gray, and had Gray go about his Devil Slaying abilities. So if we have an additional one eventually, is it going to start fitting a theme? Are we going to see maybe again areas that Gray was able to fight off? I think the idea of if Ferris, like, Pokemon summoned in, 4 or 5 different demons, and they're just these crazy out of control demons that are all just, each an elemental, each elemental and themed, and then it's just like, oh, these are failed Devil Slayers. There's only been a couple that's resulted in where you're at, where you're able to control it. And you have just maybe say like Gray, Silver, and then maybe Lekka, and that's why his fire was different. It's because he's also a Devil Slayer. Who knows? So with that, I'd love to hear what other people have to say about Devil Slaying magic. I'm going to do a video more in talking about the mechanics and talking about just how it works in similarity, but also in contrast to Dragon Slaying magic. But I wanted to talk about it, like what we knew about it beforehand, what we know about it from recent information, but also the weirdness that it exists in the verse, and the fact that we don't have a set way that it, where it came from exactly. We don't have any way where a character can be like, oh yeah, here's my explanation of how it's, why these characters are present like this. But other than that, I'd like to hear what you guys have to say on this. I'll talk to you guys in the next one.